There's a few big new Nintendo Switch 2 leaks floating around online that we have to discuss today because some of these are very exciting and actually tied to shipping data info, which aka that means we're not going off of somebody's opinion that's claiming that they have knowledge of this thing and you hope that that knowledge is accurate. Rather, this is like verifiable data tied to Nintendo and components that they are ordering for their upcoming console that we know to expect them to announce officially within this fiscal year, aka by March of 2025. And these first couple pieces of information we're going to go over are about as concrete of style leaks as you can get when it comes to new hardware. Now, there is also some other claims online stemming from Fami boards suggesting that this new console may have a very different capability or maybe even gimmick that you could call it that many of us weren't expecting. I'm putting that second portion of the leaked news, which we will distinguish between the two very clearly when we're talking about A and B, but I'm putting that second piece of information in a much lower regard in terms of my expectations on it being official for sure info that will be related to the console's ultimate release. But there's a lot to unpack today. Before we get on the same page with everything, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And we have to first talk about yet another shipping data leak that has been being discussed online with two different pieces of information related to Nintendo Switch hardware. The first of which has to do with a 60-watt charger that will now be included in the box as opposed to the 36-watt that is in the original Switch. And that's going to have some big implications, not only for just console charging in general and how fast it goes, but also how high you can clock the processor when it is in docked mode. Then the other piece of information tied to it has to do with a secondary fan that it is believed will be placed in the dock. As you can see this following post over on our Gaming Leaks and Rumors, which reads, Switch successor may have a cooler on the dock and a 60-watt charger. Apparently, the successor to the Nintendo Switch will have a 60-watt charger. For comparison, the Switch 1 has a charger with a maximum of 36 watts and will have a cooler in the dock. In fact, it is not yet known where the second cooler will be placed, but it's unlikely that a portable console will have two coolers, so it will probably be in the dock. So first, let's unpack this charger piece and the implications around that. 60 watts obviously is significantly more power than 36, and that would mean that the console is going to be working with a lot more power when it is in docked mode, or even just for the simple convenience factor of if you've ever been trying to play a game and maybe your Switch gets close to dying, you want to charge it, but you only have a limited amount of time to be near a plug. In theory, this should go significantly quicker for charging in terms of recharging the console via fast charging than it would with a much lower wattage charger like we had in the original Switch. So just a nice quality of life thing where if you're on low battery, you can get your console back up to an acceptable level of battery quite a bit quicker with a 60 watt versus a 36 watt. The bigger implication of this though is the amount of power that the dock will now have access to in terms of pumping through to the console to up things like the clock speed for the hardware or the CPU and GPU within this console, and that's what translates to better game performance. And we already know all of the claims that something along the lines of a T239 NVIDIA chip, customized chipset with Nintendo optimized games. Mind you, I've seen some reports recently being circulated online about this thing being compared one-to-one with Steam Deck, and maybe the CPU is clocked slightly slower than the Steam Deck. That's coming from Moore's Law is Dead, which may or may not have good info on it. But one massive thing that's being left out on all that reporting is the fact that even if it's just raw horsepower a little bit underclocked compared to the Steam Deck, which is actually claimed the GPU should be a little bit more sufficient than the Steam Deck, you're still forgetting that you have new tools at play straight from NVIDIA, the same chip manufacturer that's putting the primary graphics chipset within this thing, like DLSS tech. That's going to significantly help whenever it comes to being able to downgrading the native resolution, but yet upscaling it via AI and having it run way more effectively. Not to mention the fact that Steam Deck is actually running PC games that, yes, there are Steam Deck verified games and things that developers can do to kind of help it run more smooth on a Steam Deck, but we are talking about Nintendo first-party hardware and game developers designing their games specifically to run on that hardware. So there will be a lot of additional levers that you can pull to get better performance out of games with a standalone console that's being developed for directly from these companies. Very different than the PC landscape and the Steam Deck landscape that you see kind of out there today. Now, the part two of the shipping information has to do with that fan in the dock, or supposedly that's where it would go, because you wouldn't put necessarily two major cooling fans within the Switch itself, especially considering it's a portable form factor, and we do indeed know that it's supposed to be an 8-inch display and naturally a larger footprint in general, but not large enough for two separate cooling fans. So the speculation is that this one's going to go into the dock And on the surface level, that may sound kind of weird. It also may tie into what I'm considering a less credible leak that we're going to talk about in a moment. But if you look at general like aftermarket accessories that claim to cool down consoles with having a fan on the back of a laptop or something like that, it seems like when these things are detached from the console, they really don't hold much value at all in terms of actually cooling down your internal thermals, which is all that matters. So maybe there is some more intelligent design from Nintendo around this, and something like when you dock the Switch, you could potentially be making direct connections in that dock with like the copper cooling system within the actual system itself, which would allow that fan to have a much more meaningful role to be able to exhaust out more heat, which would in theory also let that clock speed and graphical performance be that much better in docked play, which is really what I'm excited about the prospect for with this thing, because I love to have the ability to take all of my games handheld mode, but I am okay with a little bit of a visual downgrade when running in handheld mode. What I don't like is when you're gaming on a 4K TV and you just notice really low resolution textures that just do not translate well to modern televisions that are larger, and you see performance hiccups and slowdowns and dropped frames and things like that. This is all stuff that can be very easily eliminated with enough horsepower in the console, and this is going to be a massive leap forward from what we have with the current family of Switches today by all accounts. So additional cooling would be a big win for this system, and it appears that a secondary fan is in the mix to some extent, so that will be very interesting to see if it is indeed placed within the dock. So that catches us up to speed with what we know from the shipping information, but the part 2 and what I'm considering to be the less credible portion of what we're going to talk about today is some claims floating around coming from some Family Boards users that I don't know how well connected these people are, and I also don't know where they're exactly getting these claims from, but there is some reason to believe, at least from these users, and it is picking up traction online, that the dock could indeed be capable of connecting to the Switch wirelessly, essentially allowing you to stream your Switch to the TV screen with your Switch in your hand, almost Chromecast or AirPlay device style, which again, this is a very interesting claim, and it could lead into the idea, again, with that fan that we discussed, if there is some more advanced internals within this dock, that is a possibility that they need a fan to cool down the dock, because the dock actually has something going on in there from a chipset perspective. So you can see this next post over on our Gaming Leaks and Rumors, which reads, Switch 2 might stream to TV without a dock. There's a rumor floating around thanks to Family Boards users Pablo and Raccoon that the Switch 2 could allow streaming gameplay to your TV without needing to dock the console, hence the previous news about fans in it, similar to AirPlay or Chromecast. The dock would be used as a wireless receptor. This could also bring back the dual screen features we saw on the Wii U while keeping the hybrid aspect, potentially opening up possibilities for DS and 3DS game compatibility. Imagine playing on a big screen while keeping the second screen for inventory or maps. Now on the surface, that doesn't sound like a bad feature to have, but it better not be the only way you can play to a TV, because one, I don't think we have latency figured out to the level that we need to in order to have a good native experience on a TV through that streaming solution. And two, that sounds an awful lot like a Wii U to me, and we do not need a Switch U situation out here. While I did love the functionality and the game library of the Wii U, it's honestly not a gimmick that went over well with fans. And again, this wouldn't be a big problem if it's just a feature within the Switch, but not the primary way that you play in docked play. And that's where I would like to kind of unpack this a little bit further, because I do actually see a world where you could potentially have this as an option, but not the only way to do it. So if you are docking your Switch 2, it's getting the extra power boost from being plugged in, it's utilizing the cooling within the dock, and you're getting a much better native gameplay experience when it is in that mode. However, if you are in a situation where you do want to use your Switch in handheld play, kind of as the controller, but still be able to stream your game to the TV, you're gonna have the more handheld quality of visuals, because obviously the dock's not gonna be its own console on its own, but you're streaming it AirPlay or Chromecast style, and that's kind of a stopgap solution for something like DS and 3DS gameplay if it makes it to Nintendo Switch Online, which I believe will happen one day, even if it just comes down to Nintendo releasing a touchscreen controller of some sort and selling it as part of the NSO benefit. Then they have some like wonky workarounds where you can point and aim your Joy-Con at the TV to kind of simulate the touch controls that way. Like, Nintendo will come up with a way to do that, I am confident. but whether or not this is it remains to be seen. So it's an interesting claim. It's definitely an idea that I could see Nintendo implementing as an option, but again, I'm not picturing this as like the only way, like, oh, now the Switch 2 doesn't need a dock in order to play on docked play. No, I think you would definitely want to dock it when possible for the best performance, and maybe there is some kind of cast option to the dock, even though the console is not physically seated in the dock like we do with our Switch family of systems today. And it would be an interesting way to solve for some of those touchscreen issues if we are to expect DS and 3DS games to be added into NSO eventually. So that's where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What do you make of all of this different information? Do you think that we are indeed getting the 60-watt charger and the fan in the dock for sure? And what do you think the implications of that are? Just better graphics and visuals and a more capable console at the end of the day? Or do you think there's a different reason for that fan in the dock, and maybe that second piece of information is indeed accurate and the dock plays a bigger part as a standalone component and you can stream to it from your Switch and get your image on the TV that way? And are you thinking, if that is a feature like I am, that it's going to be an optional one and something you can do instead of docking your console, but you'll have just that limitation of the handheld quality of gameplay? Or do you think that's primarily how Nintendo communicates with the dock? I definitely don't see that happening for next gen at this point in time, but I'd love to hear your thought process if you do. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.